Come on, John. Candy.
Sorry, now?
Yes, permission to send it, yes. Where'd Lydia go? Oh, there you are. Was there some other thing I was supposed to say? Where is the guest book? Yeah, because we don't have any room where we're gonna. Okay, so we have the guest book sitting over there. There's another one over there, but food. And Okay, good plan, good plan. I just would ask the speakers if they could use the mic because we're recording this, and it has a limited range with that microphone, so obviously it's going to carry if you use the microphone. So thanks for coming. This is our History Night. We sure do appreciate you being here. I'm Rick Nelson, the curator. I'll just give you the order of our speakers and sort of like the agenda for tonight. So we'll have Audrey Newlands will be coming up and talking about berry boats. Elva Lloyd will be here for farming. Diane Fraser is going to talk about commercial fishing. Stan and Jackie Gordon. So you're not a team, you're coming up individually, okay? Talking about, as I have written down here, a surprise. So, okay. And Austin Hunt, you're here. Austin, good. I said to Austin, come here at 5:45. Quarter to 7. He said, 6:45. I thought it was 7 o'clock. I said, if you come here at 6:45, I can be guaranteed you'll be here for 7 o'clock. So, yeah. Thank you, Austin. And you're going to talk about the 125? Is that where you're?
What am I talking about?
Well, originally we were going to have you talk about.
I said 125.
What do you want to talk about?
That's what I said.
What do you want to talk about?
She said something. Well,
You can talk about anything you want.
No, I can't.
Be careful.
I said you were an
Too
expert.
much leeway.
Mary said I was to talk about the turn of the century, which I don't really remember being there.
No.
It's not what I heard.
was only 9 years ago.
She was recovered in the 20th century.
You're going to talk about relics? That's what I heard.
Yeah. Well, I can do that.
You're an expert in relics, so we'll get you to talk about that or something. You can talk about whatever you want. You're the read. And then we're going to take a break, and if you haven't had a chance to take a look at the museum, by all means, walk around, and I'll certainly be around. We've got museum board members here that can walk you through. We'd love you to take a look. And then you can take a break as well. Hi, how are you? Come on in. And take a break, and we got a couple of seats back there.
Yeah.
A couple of seats back there.
Oh, they can all come.
Or you can all come.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll take a break between after the speeches are over. Yeah, I mentioned that. So we'll do the tour, you have yourself a coffee, and we have the lemonade that's just below the donation jar. And then we'll do Jeopardy, which is going to be a lot of fun. We have prizes that we'll be giving away, and we'll talk about those as we get into the game itself. So, Mary, you want to say something? Go right ahead.
Come on in, Ronnie. I'd just like to say there is one speaker that I had asked to be here for History Night, and unfortunately she passed away. So this evening, History Night, is dedicated to the memory of Helen Tracy. So she's one speaker that is here in spirit, because she wrote when it all began and about the history of Kagawong. So she's very much into history and an amazing storyteller. So we dedicate this evening to Helen. And her daughters Carmen and Candy are here. And actually Candy composed a ballad for Buildings 125, and maybe if we're brave, we could do it, because we've got copies here, and it's sung to Ghost Rider in the Sky. So anyway.
Okay, I think up first is Audrey Newlands, and of course she was born and raised around boats, and I bet you're going to talk about berry boats, aren't you? That would be my logical assumption. So let's hear it for Audrey Newlands.
Well, it's really nice being here this evening, and nice to see the turnout. I'm Audrey Newlands. I was Audrey Berry, born Audrey Berry, and I just want to say a special thank you to Rick, because he's even made room for berry boats in the far corner there, and I think that's pretty special. And so boats have been a big part of my life, and actually the Berry Boat Company is over 100 years old now. It began with my grandparents, Oliver Berry Sr. and my grandma, May Berry. And actually, it originated right on these grounds, right in this area, right here, which they used to call the flats. And my grandparents had a large shop here on this property and a 2-story house. And they used to build boats, and we have pictures of the huge boats he built up to 60 feet right on the shore here. And then they'd be launched into the water. And some he even delivered to the United States by water, so it was quite interesting. And so they were here till around 1924, 25, and then for some reason, I'm not sure what, they left here and moved up to where the Esso station is now. And of course, back in those days, we didn't have the large equipment to move buildings like we do now. It was skids and horses, and the shop was quite large, so it was removed in sections and taken up in sections. And the house was raised and skids were put under it, and then there were 32 horses that pulled the house, the 2-story house. And Russ Carter from the Carter house, he's passed away now, but he told me one day at the post office that his father's horse was the chosen horse to lead because it was a pretty special horse and he was good to lead. So anyhow, they got the house halfway up this steep hill the first night and had to leave it overnight. And what you couldn't do now, the cars would be flying over it. But anyhow, the next day they were able to get it up beside the river. And but it's funny, as a child growing up, I always felt as many times as I was in that house that it was not properly settled. And so I mentioned this to my father's youngest brother, Uncle Cletus, once, and he said, you know, you're right about that. He said, when that house was brought to the property out there, he says it wasn't properly settled because he said your grandma and grandpa had an argument. He said your grandfather wanted the kitchen facing the shop, which was towards the river, and your grandma wanted the kitchen facing the back of the property. And so it was never properly settled. I guess at any time the horses could have been, if someone had won the argument, the horses could have been brought in and turned around a little bit. So anyhow, they passed away. Both of them passed away in 1957, and my father, Oliver Berry Jr., which was, of course, their son, he had already started into boat building, up actually where we are now. I guess most of you know where Ferry Boats is now. And he and my mother built boats for a number of years. And actually Jan Albert, that is here, my parents built a boat for her parents years ago, which is actually in the museum today. So we're very fortunate, Jan, that you and your sister donated it to the museum. Very nice. And then my husband and I, like my father passed away in December of 1962, and then through time my mother was selling the business, and we decided to buy it, my husband and I. And we built boats for a number of years, and then through time we kind of phased out that part. It got difficult to get local good white cedar, and we brought in red cedar from British Columbia for a few years and kept on building, but through time we kind of phased that out, and then of course the fiberglass boats started coming in too, and other materials. And one thing I should mention about my parents is that they had a toy shop on the property we're on now, and this was before the war. Well, it was around the time the Second World War was over, I guess. It was around that time they were making wooden toys, and they had a toy shop, and the tourists just loved it, and sold a lot of toys, and they also shipped a lot of toys to Toronto and to Montreal to different large stores there, and they were sold through that source. And I guess I should, I don't know, my 10 minutes is up, but anyhow.
We'll give you an extension, don't worry.
Just want to say, like my husband and I are sort of semi-retired from the business now, and our son Oliver is pretty much over it now, and we have excellent help. And so what they do is they store boats, they repair boats, and work in small engines, and sell ATVs and outboard motors and saws and all that sort of thing. And so it's continuing in that capacity. So I'm just going to mention something about the toys that my father designed and made. That they had a little, some of them were quite cute. He made a little pole bunny that was, of course, made out of wood, with a little handle on it. When you would pull it, it would hop. And then he also made a duck, and it would jump. It would waddle, I should say, when it moved along. It was kind of cute too. He made a lot of bows and arrows, and just a lot of things. Other than that, and I don't know if there's anything else I should say.
I think there's one thing we should say, Audrey.
Yes?
It is that, because they made caskets.
Oh yes, my grandma did. I should say that Barry family made everything out of wood that could be made, and caskets was one. And yes, my grandfather and grandma used to make caskets, and my grandma used to line them with silk. And that was another thing they did, and built houses and furniture and just about everything out of wood that could be made. So I don't know, I'm probably missing something.
Well, I don't think I've ever formally thanked you, Audrey and Willie, for making the Berry Boats exhibit complete. It's just a beautiful exhibit over there. And of course, Jan and your boat too, so we sure do appreciate your contribution to the museum, because it's very special. We get a lot of wonderful comments about it. So thank you for your contribution to the Old Mill Heritage Center.
Well, thank you. It's special to Jan and I and her family.
Oh, there's another one too. I think it was your grandfather who built our place over in Kagawong.
The comedy? Yes, I can remember that impression too. That's
So we've been Oliver Berry Senior. So I feel like the two families or something.
Well, it's a family affair over there in the
Yes,
corner. As you see, part of the Trillium grant was to build this barn inside. Agriculture is a very important component for Billings Township, so it was very important to us that we feature it in some way, shape, or form. So I guess the best way to do it was to build a barn, so that's what we did. And we have pictures of barns from Billings, and I know we've left a few out. I've had a few people come up and say, hey, what about our barn? We're going to certainly get to them. And of course, we have the exhibit on the wall of the various tools that Ozzy probably used when he was a young lad. And, oh, sorry, Oz. So it's great to have Alva Lloyd here, because she's going to talk about farming. And can I say to you, Alva, because just in case I miss something, and don't thank you, she has contributed a number of photographs that we're going to be using in the future, featuring life on Clapperton Island. Some great lighthouse pictures out there. So Alva, would you like to come up and talk about farming?
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Mary, for inviting me to talk. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been asked to do an hour talk on the pioneer life of Billings. Although I'm not a pioneer, I'm only 29. I imagine life here is the same as it was where I grew up. Before I get into farming, I'll start with Moses Lloyd, my husband's great-grandfather. He immigrated into Canada from England in 1873, and he came to Manitoulin Island in 1876, and his family joined him on May the 6th in 1879. And I have the deed to the property he purchased from Lot 22, Concession 13, in Billings from the Ojibwe Indians on August 7th, 1907. Moses was 51 years old when he came, and he brought with him his tools, which he had made himself, and each one was stamped with his initials. And he was a cabinet maker by trade, and he built the house, which is still standing, but is in pretty bad shape now. And he also made funeral caskets and furniture. He made all the desks for the Billings School for $7. I don't know how many there were, but I would think there were probably 20 or 30 of them. And when he came, he brought a cow, a calf, and a few chickens with him. Now to the life of the farm. The only running water was when someone grabbed a pail, ran to the well, taken it outside, and either dipped water from a hole in the ground, or if they were lucky enough in the later years to have a pump to pump the water up. Of course, that meant no bathrooms, so one had to go outdoors to the Meffy, or two-holer as it was called. And of course, there was no toilet paper invented yet, so they had to use the Eaton's or Sears catalog. Baths were taken in a round tub placed beside the wood cook stove, which had a reservoir at one end to heat the water. A screen was placed around the tub for privacy, and everyone in the family used the same bath water. Can you imagine how sanitary that was? Using the same water and not being able to shower every day. My first recollection of the farm was in the spring. The farmer would hitch a horse up to a single furrowed plow and plow the fields for planting if this hadn't been done in the fall. Later came a two-furrowed plow, and so until now it's done by tractor with the plow on the back of it. Next was the planting of seeds. A team of horses was hitched to a seed drill which had a long box which held the grain, etc., with pipes down to distribute the grain over the fields. The driver stood on the board which was fastened to the back. There was probably a more primitive way before this, but this was my first memory. After the seeding was done, next came the haying. A team of horses was hooked up to a mower. The farmer sat in a seat and operated a blade 5 or 6 feet long that cut the hay. He would lift the blade up and down as it was needed. Now that is all done by tractor, swather, or hay binder. After the hay was cut and dried, it was next raked into the windrows by a dump rake, which had several curved prongs in it to gather the hay up until it was full. Then the farmer pulled a lever and dumped the hay into rows across the field. Everyone would then go out and coil the hay. That is, make heaps of hay all over the field from these windrows. The horses were again hitched to a wagon that had racks in it. There were ropes laid across the bottom of the wagon to make slings to put the hay in. There were 4 slings per wagon load. They would then go around the field and gather up the coils of hay. One person would throw the hay up onto the wagon, and one would spread it equally around to make an even load. When the wagon was full, it was then taken to the barn where another horse was usually kept. This horse was then fastened to a rope, which was fastened to the slings on the hay on the wagon. Then the horse would pull the rope, pulling the hay up to the roof of the barn and across a track in the barn, which went to a haymow. Someone would pull another rope, which would release the hay and let it drop. Then a couple of people would spread the hay evenly around the mow. This is all done by machines now, so it saves a lot of work for the farmers. The next was getting the grain harvested once it was ripe. It was cut with a machine called a binder that was pulled by 3 horses with someone sitting on a seat to operate it. It was a machine that had a blade with about a 5-foot cut with sort of an elevator to carry the grain up, and was made into sheaves and tied with binder twine. These sheaves were put into stocks which were 8 sheaves stood on end, somewhat like the hay coils. This was done to help drying it and keep it from rotting from the rain until thrashing time. It was then brought into the barn in the same fashion as the hay was. The next step was the thrashing. This separated the grain from the straw or stems of the grain. There was usually only one thrashing machine in the community, and everyone used it. There would be thrashings at each farm, and everyone would help. Then they would go on to the next farm, and so on. The women would cook an elaborate meal for up to 20 men. Thrashing is all done by combine now. I understand it does all of the above in one process. I'm sure there was more primitive ways before my time, and there's much more to tell, but I'm sure I've been up here for 3 hours, so thank you for your time.
that she was able to get for us. When you get the opportunity to tour during the break, there's a pinnacle compass that's over the display table just in front of those motor engines. And it comes off a ship called the North Wind that sank off of Clapperton Island in 1926. It was about a 300-foot long cargo vessel that ran aground, or some people say was purposely run aground. And as it broke up and pieces of the bridge eventually washed ashore, I think it was on Clapperton Island that it washed ashore. And along with some of the debris was this beautiful pinnacle compass that was used for obviously navigation. I had Buck Longhurst come in here and have a look at it. He says that thing is worth thousands of dollars. And Elva got her friend Mary Bender to give it to the museum, so we sure do appreciate that. And it's over. It's a beautiful addition to the museum, so thank you very much for that. Okay, ladies first, and the Gordon family. So Jackie. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Miss. Here.
My voice is long now.
Here. Blah, 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 blah. Diane Fraser is here, and of course her family, known for commercial fishing, the Graham family. And Diane, would you like to come up and tell your tale? Where are you? Oh, okay, Diane Fraser.
Thank you, Rick. Good evening, everyone. I consider it an honor to be able to come and share the history of this area. And on with what Alva was saying, we have some of Moses Lloyd's tools in this glass case right here. So people afterwards can have a look. I believe they're planes, and there's 3 of them there that he brought over when he came. Anyway, the Graham brothers, commercial fishing. The Graham family came from Ireland to Quebec in 1837. Around 1878, they decided to go west, but when they reached Owen Sound, they heard about Manitoulin Island and bought passage there instead. The Graham family settled in Kagawong, where there was timbering, farming, and fishing. The original Graham brothers who started commercial fishing in Kagawong were William Graham II, Matthew Graham, Robert Graham, George Graham, and T.J. Thompson, who was married to his sister, Jane Graham. Others who joined the business were Fred Graham, Barney Graham, Cecil Lloyd, Stuart McConnell, Cecil Wilson, William Graham III, and Lau Graham, my father. They fished out of a steam tug called the Everett or the Everett, and we have a scale model here that's been made by one of the Lloyd family. And here we have an actual picture of the Everett here in Mudge Bay. The Everett or the Everett was built in Gore Bay in 1900 by Alec Purvis. The official number of the ship was 107484 and the registered tonnage was 16.67. The tug was 51 feet long, about 13 feet wide, and had a draft of 7 feet. It was powered by steam, with wood being used to fire the boiler. The Everett was docked at the Graham Brothers dock on the east side of Mudge Bay. The tug was rebuilt in the 1920s at a dry dock in Gore Bay. Gill nets and pound nets were used to catch lake trout, whitefish, sturgeon, pickerel, and pike. The fish were separated, cleaned, and packed in ice with 100 pounds of fish in each box. The fish boxes were supplied by the Graham Sawmill and the William McKenzie and William McDermott Fish Box Factory, which were both right here in Kagawong. The ice was cut out of Mudge Bay in the wintertime and stored in an ice house using sawdust as insulation. The boxes of fish were stored in the warehouse on the dock, and the nets were kept in the net sheds on the shore near the dock. The fish were shipped to Owen Sound on the boats the Manitou and the Caribou that came right to the Graham Brothers dock twice a week. From Owen Sound, the fish were shipped by train to Toronto and New York. In later years, they were shipped by truck. Commercial fishing started to come to an end because of the high number of nets, shoal fishing in the spawning season, and the introduction of the lamprey eel to the Great Lakes. The Everett was last used in 1941 and was left at the Graham Brothers dock, where part of the hull can still be seen, which is over on the east side of the bay right over here. And the boiler is near the bridge beside the Old Mill Road, and the anchor is just outside of the grounds of the Old Mill Heritage Center right outside the doors back here. The engine was removed and taken to Milton. Just as an aside, I also did some research into Fred Graham, who worked on the tug, and they developed the Fred and Harry fisheries. So Fred Graham and Harry Pierce did commercial fishing in a 40-foot berry boat, which was pointed at the bow and stern. It had an inboard gas engine and a small cabin. The boat was docked near the government dock on the west side of March Bay, where they also had an ice house. They fished for whitefish and trout using gill nets around West Bay, Innes, and Clapperton. The fish would be cleaned on the way home and then packed with chipped ice from their own ice house on the dock and placed into the wooden fish boxes again from the William Mackenzie and William McDermott fish box factory. And then the fish were shipped out on the Caribou and the Manitou. Also, there is an exhibit here in the museum at the back on commercial fishing. So this is the Everett, which is was docked over here on the east side of the bay.
You see where the dock drive the nets, the reels that were there. They drive the nets on.
This is a picture of them. This is on the deck of the boat. You can see the man working in the fish boxes, yes.
Parts of that fish lifter are still in the lake over there.
And this is the scale model. We actually did it to scale it was built. What was unusual too is that usually boats this size, because they weren't that big, but this one had a little lifeboat, which was unusual. It was a relative of Helen Lloyd's. The Joe family was into Great Lakes and shipping.
That's a good model.
Yeah, and all the scale, all the dimensions are there. Thank you.
Very good presentation, Diane, and Diane has been our ship's compass as far as it goes for our museum. There's been many a time that I've been completely overwhelmed with this position here at the museum, and Tom and Diane and Jan and Ozzy have been wonderful. They've been a wonderful support crew, but Diane has been our beacon, our compass, and sure to appreciate having you with us. Okay, now we're with the Gordons. And Jackie, I don't know what you're going to talk about. I have it written down as a surprise. Is Stan going first? Well, aren't you the nice person? Stan Gordon, ladies and gentlemen, star of stage, screen, and police lineups.
Thank you very much. I chose to talk about disastrous fires in Billings and Allen Township that has happened over the last 100 years, plus a few, I guess. But would you believe there's been 11 children perished in fires in that time? Of course, it was back then, how did you heat? It had to be a wood stove, and often it was more than one in a house or a place of business, with a long series of stovepipes that often caused problems. And along with that was the coal oil lamps. They were dangerous. And of course, the buildings were all wonderful. And fire was a very long threat. In Kagawong in 1960, 4 children perished in a house fire very location, there's still a lilac tree there. It was only some 20 minutes from the time the fire was noted until the house collapsed. It was a very sad day, and I was there. We had a pump. It was in March, so there was melt water in the ditch, and we had pumped and put water on it, but it didn't help a whole lot. And of course the police were there, and they wouldn't let us go until they found the children. I didn't sleep at all that night. Then in 1930, on East Bluff, that's east of Corbin in Allen Township, 3 children perished in the home of Mr. and Mrs. Wilson. There was Dorothy, 6 years old, Alpha, 2 years old, and Gladys, 11 months. In 1948, the Ice Lake store and home caught fire in the early morning. At the time, Neil and Sally McDougall and 3 children, Laura, Glenn, and Sharon, and Miss J. Guy, and Elmer Gordon were residents of the house. It was in the early morning, and Elmer managed to put oil out of the upstairs window and dropped him to the ground. Then they felt that he'd left to help get the 2 girls out. They were just young, 2 and 3 years old. But they had escaped out the window onto the roof of the shed at the back. The owner was apparently overcome by smoke and didn't make it. In November 1910, at the home of my grandfather's place, 2 children perished in a house fire. There were 3 children in the home. 4-year-old twins, my father and his sister Jessie, and Arthur, who was a year and a half old. When my grandfather went to enter the house, he couldn't get through the front door, so he went through the back and managed to stumble on my dad and was able to bring him to safety. And one more child perished about 1967 at the Moore home, east of West Vale, on the road to Little Creek. Should have these children have lived. What difference would have been made? No, really.
Well, all I want to say, Stan, is we're so happy that your father survived that fire, so that you're here today. Stan took me out to where that fire occurred out at Maple Point, and it was a long walk out there, and certainly it brought back a lot of memories for Stan, and it was an emotional moment for him to take me out, but I surely do appreciate you taking me out there, showing me where that happened. And we had an exhibit here last year documenting that event, and Loyal McDougall was here as well. He was saved by it was your uncle, wasn't it? I'm sorry, your brother from in 1947. Was it 40, I'm sorry, was it 47 that?
48.
48 that happened, and Loyal told me that for years after he was saved from that fire by your brother, he spent a lot of time, whenever he went into a building that he'd never been in before, he spent all that, a good portion of the time going into a new building looking for the exits, wanting to know where the exits were. And he said it took him a long time to get over that, but again, a heroic moment for your brother, and again, we're so happy that your father survived that fire in 1910 so that you're here with us today. So, thank you for telling that story. I know it was tough for you. Jackie, will you have a surprise for us?
Well, first of all, we were going through some of Stan's dad's things, and we have boxes still of it. Stan to get rid of it. But in a little notebook, his grandfather had written 2 poems after the death of these 2 children. I'm going to read them to you. It's called Departed This Life. My dear little ones have departed this life and have gone to heaven above, where angels sing the songs of God and the praises of the Lamb. They are free from temptation and trials. They have escaped this world's cares. And I ought to be glad to know, dear Lord, that they are free from Satan's snares. It's awful to think the way they died in those fierce and awful flames. But with the help of God, I mean to see them again. And the other one was, lost my babies. I lost my 2 wee babies. They have gone from me away, from the land of sin and sorrow to one of endless days. They are better by far with their Savior in his little angel land, sitting around the throne of God with harps in their little hands. They will never know the sorrow and the pain of this world below. And oh my God, it was so hard on me to let them go. I have lived a life of sorrow and sin, and I have drifted far to sea. But there's one thing I would pray, O Lord, one thing I would pray of thee, that when I lay on my bed of death, and this world is no more for me, that thou, O Lord, in thy kindness, will send me my little ones for me. And that's it. One of the things that Stan talked to you about his brother's death at Ice Lake, we were going to high school together, and he and I were going together. And I was studying, I lived in Gorbea and Stan lived in Kagawong. And I was studying for a grade 13 exam. As we were in grade 12, we could take our grade 13 exam. And I heard the fire alarm go, because I lived right on the main street. And finally, I went out to see what was going on, and when I got there, somebody told me it was Stan. Well, I was really shook up, but I saw him coming up the road, so I realized that it wasn't he. But it was really, I never forgot that. It really shook me up. I wasn't really sure what to talk about. I have so many things that I'm like Helen. I know so much about Kagawong. Although I was born in Gorbea, I spent more years in Kagawong than I did there. So, and I used to do bus touring guides, so I knew a lot about the history of Kagawong. One thing, the Gordon family came here in 1879. They came from Scotland near Dufftown, and Dufftown we went to visit it when we visited Scotland, and Dufftown has a motto. It says, Rome was built in 7 days, but Rome was built on 7 hills, but Dufftown was built with 7 stills. It's very true. There are many whiskey, not stills so much, but places where they make whiskey. And they came to Jarvis, Ontario first, and then one more child was born. And then they moved up here to Manitoulin, and we still own the property that they settled on. And every time I go by that lot, or the lot, and there's only about this much soil on it, And it's at the top of the Gordon Hill, just before you get to where you look at the lookout. And they lived there 10 years with 6 or 7 kids. And I don't know how what did they do for water? I always kept wondering what they did for water. They had a house and a barn and they had cattle, but you can see that they plowed it because there are ridges to show where the plowing was done. And then in 1889, they bought the 200 acres that's just kind of quarter-wise from their lot. Their lot's here, and the new lots go this way, because the lots on the west side of the road at Maple Point, the lots go north and west, north and south. But the lots on the other side of the road, they go down to the lake. So they bought 200 acres on the other side and continued to farm out there until 1933, I think. Stan's dad and Elmer and Stan moved into, and his wife moved into a farm just up the road from Barry's. But that means that we, and now our Stan and our son own the lot, so we have 6 generations of Kagawongs living in, or Gordons living in Kagawong. We actually have 7 generations of Gordons on the island, and this was Jim Gordon, and this was Stan's grandfather here, and then Stan, and then I Stan, and then Peter, and Todd, and his son Rick Will. And then the Brillinger family, the same. The Sagles were another family that settled out there. And they were a little further on. In fact, the old road that went to the Dodge estate went through to their place and then came down across to what we call the Crozier Field and into the Dodge estate. Not like it does now, but it wasn't a very good road when the Dodge people lived out there. I taught school here on the island for 32 years, and I want to tell you one of my experiences. I taught in Long Bay, which is across the lake, about 25 miles. I had a rural school at 12 kids, which was unusual for a rural school. And I had several grades, I just don't remember for sure which I had, but I had no grade 1 the first year. So I must have had a 2 and a 4, and I know I had a grade 7. And I carried the water from here over there. There was no water and no hydrant. And I was petrified of fire in that at school because we had a wood fire at the back of a wood stove, and I was always petrified because I only had this one little cream can of water, which invariably would upset when I was driving, so I always didn't always get there with it. But that's one of the schools I really remember, and next year I had 14 students, so I had a grade 1 with a couple of kids in it that year. But we put on a Christmas concert the first year in the afternoon, and then the second year we had lights, so we put it on in the evening, and everybody came from miles around, it seemed to me. Did you ever try to put on a Christmas concert with 14 kids? I had the boys dressed up as maids and angels and all kinds of things, but it was really quite interesting. And then I taught in Allen, which is Pleasant Valley, and I had quite a few more kids then. But they brought, at that time in 1960, Stan's mother was teaching here at the school at the top of the hill, and I was teaching at Pleasant Valley. But she had so many children that they decided to bus them up, some of them up to me, so I got a grade 4 and a grade 6 when they brought them up to me. And I brought some of them in my Volkswagen bus, and I'm not too sure how the rest of them got there. Somebody must have used a bus to bring them up. But coming home one time, I ran out of gas on the Allen line, so the kids pushed me to the top of the hill so I could coast down to the first house and get some gas. Another time, an interesting, kind of a funny story. I had a sundress with a zipper right down the back. And I got to school one morning and the zipper went. So I said to the kids, I sat at the door, got them all busy on their spelling. I said, I have to go home for a minute. I'll be right back. I drove back to Kagawong, changed my dress and got back. I said, you stay in your seats. When I came back, they were all in their seats, but I don't think they stayed there. I also had a deer visit me. The farm next to us had a pet deer. And that was the first year I was teaching there. And the doors were open in the fall, and in came this deer through the door. And I'm standing at the front, so I kind of sidled away down the one aisle, and it came up the aisle, and in front of the desk, and peered over the desk just as if it was going to teach something. And then it turned and came down through the seats, and went back and had a drink out of a basin that we had at the back, and then went on out the door again. It was quite a shock for me. I don't know what else to tell you about. I have lots of things I could tell you about. Oh, I'll tell you about the Waterhouse piano. Do you know the story about that? Well, Mr. Waterhouse built a cabin on the 8th concession, which is the concession that comes down from the Bowser Hill. You went straight on, it's the 8th concession. I think the 14th concession is the one that runs from the school to what we call Bella's Corner, and then carries on to Billings Stretch. And it's 1.25 miles from each concession. So Mr. Waterhouse was a magician rather, not a magician. But I think he was a magician when you think about this piano. And the piano came in by boat. Now you know the hill the way it is now. Well, it certainly didn't look like that when he was here. In fact, I often wondered how they got up that hill. Did they kind of switch back up? I think they must have, yes, at one time. And he hired some Indians from West Bay, and they skidded his piano up to his cabin on the 8th concession, and they went through the flats where there's not quite so much bush. It took them 3 weeks to do it. And when he got out there, they couldn't get it in through the door. It was a grand piano. So they had to cut a hole in the house at the cabin to get it in. And when they got it in there wasn't any room for his daughter Mary Ellen to sleep, so she slept on top of that grand piano. And he taught her piano because she didn't have any playmates near, and that was what he did. He was a professor. And many of her descendants are very musical. And she married one of the Farquhars, and then all the descendants through there are quite musical. They're still, their descendants are quite musical. It's quite an interesting story.
Jackie has been a great help to me in getting the Dodge story developed. A lot of the research material has come my way thanks to Jackie. And of course, Stan has almost single-handedly provided all the artifacts that are here in this museum. When we started up between Ozzy and Stan, they were providing all the artifacts, and Stan to this day still brings me something. Just keep on coming. When I see the car pull up, I know something's on its way from Mr. Gordon. So thanks again. If I've never had a formal chance to thank both of you, this is my opportunity now. And last but not least, the Reeve of Billings Township, and we're still unclear as to what he's going to talk about. We'll leave it to you. The podium is yours, sir. Austin Hunt.
Well, thank you, Mr. Curator. When I was asked, actually Mary down here asked me to do this a couple of weeks ago, and I said, sure, what do you want to talk about? And she said, well, we want to hear about the history of the township when it was incorporated 125 years ago. Now, my memory just didn't go back that far. I did have an archive of some books and collection, actually, that I looked at last night, some of them. And I'll quote some of the things from that, move along, and make comments on some of what the other speakers had said. But am I coming through, or am I too far from this thing?
You're great.
All right, thank you. Anyway, in 1884, this small village was become a sawmill town. You're familiar with that. Our two founding fathers in those large pictures back there, Henry Kagawong Lake with the timber rights and the water rights and so forth. And before that time, I think there were the odd building here, but it was just mathematic settlers that weren't really permanent in many cases. Anyway, they brought mill up from southern Ontario and used the water power of Kagawong Lake and the history that's incorporated in our walls here and so forth that you can see. And they brought with them a number of families that were our original citizens. And this wasn't unusual for what happened in a great deal of towns around the Great Lakes and so forth. They were established mostly by sawmills and this type of thing. And from that sprung the families that came with them become farmers and millwrights as well as fishermen and what have you, and the community's growth. Now, this community was incorporated hardly 10 years after that first foundation. So that means that they were, I guess, civic-minded people, but because the town was even smaller than what it is now, and Billings was incorporated in 1884. Now, the city of Toronto was, I guess, 50 years older than that, because in 1984, they hosted the centennial, of which they invited us to. We were 100 years, us and 5 other municipalities in Ontario, but Toronto was 150. And they allowed us to put a kiosk and a display in their new city hall. The new city hall in Kagawong when that just been opened. And we put a display there, which we had for a week and so forth. And quite a number of people. In fact, a few of them that moved to Kagawong, Jack Carmichael being one of them, first become aware of this by seeing what this was. And some people came up and looked at the big name buildings, and I remember one fellow saying, "Oh yes, I remember that, that's in Montana, and there's the falls of Montana." Anyway, they did that. Now this year, Toronto hasn't invited us to that. They're busy doing their own celebration. They have a city garbage display down there. And all the things. And we're going to do something here. We're all there on the 25th. And a little creative sort, doesn't have one other things. It's going to be a very interesting day. And of course, like you're right, we're going to have this building open again, and several functions taking place here. Incidentally, we're quite proud of this. This happened within 2 years, as you're all aware. We just had the official opening last week. And it's got great comments. I mean, not each little town, but a number of little towns in Manitoba do have a museum. But ours is up to par, if not better than most of them. Now, some of them have bigger collections than we have. And for instance, a great deal of our collections, such as this type of thing, are in the Gorbea Museum. And you can find many things about this museum, such as the building of this building, the boat wrecks that you were talking about, and all of this type of thing in there. To go back to the early founding of the building, as I mentioned, come about being a sawmill, but then other things sprung up, such as agriculture and so forth. And one of the things that I guess many of us aren't aware of, and once again you've got to go to the museum to see pictures from Billings Township. This is in Kagawong. They have a picture of what we call harvest trains. And in this township there were 2 of them. One was owned by the Carter family, and the other was owned by the McGills, the farm where Stan was referring to the forest. Now what these harvest trains were was a steam engine that pulled 2 or 3 little cars behind them. They moved all around the farms throughout the island and thrashed the grain for these people. And they would be away for about a month or so a year. And local people would go along with this concave and work at these things. And I understand all through the teens up until the 20s that this operation was prevalent in the island. And I guess the 2 of it here were the main 2. And you can find that down at the picture that down there. Now, of course, the Shikawinda Museum has a display on Daddy Dodge too, but because he was taken to the current, and we have a number of pictures. But this is where he came from, and I really think the tragedy didn't come from here, but these cottages here. This is where the tragedy took place, and consequently, we are hosting some of our people in 2 or 3 weeks to see what we have here from Detroit. Now, talking about activities I often mention this, to try and place what the village would be back at the turn of the century, 1900. The district of Manitoulin, which we are on, had 10,000 people at the turn of the century to that. But the district of Algoma, which is where the city of Sewell is, had 10,000 people. And the district of Sudbury, which is where the next mines are, had 10,000 people. So actually, the Manitoulin was at that time and place in the century as an important part of the Ontario as what Northern Ontario is. So these little towns belong, in the perspective, along at the turn of the century, were really more important in the geographic, or not the geographic, but the economy and so forth of the area. So what they produced and turned out, and which was all handled by packet boats at those days between mostly Tone Sound, the merchandise was out as well as the lumber and so forth, and the sealant that began to build. The first railway track, of course, went through Sudbury, and we were familiar with that and discovery of Nixon and so forth. But the spur line of the Sioux to China to Michigan went through just a few years before the turn of the century, and our early citizens could go to across the ice in the winter, across the boat to the train traffic on the North Shore up until the 20s. When we talk about roads and moving this piano, those things were really roads. They were just trails like you would cut through your backyard now. And because there are practically no vehicles other than a horse that could go something through. Vehicles really didn't come with Henry Ford's discovery. They came a number of years afterwards in the 20s. We do have a picture back here of the first ferry that ran between Kagawong and South Mouth, and it happened to be called the Kagawong. And there's a picture of that in the Notes on Transportation. It started that in 1930. Before that, cars coming to Manitoulin got on the boats at Owen Sound, who were come up to these little towns. The road between here and Gore Bay was much worse than what most of our really bad side roads are today. And so the traffic wasn't great. I mean, there wasn't that many cars either. It all blossomed after this war. The world changed, and now talking about people exhausted. The town actually was never really at the turn of the century. It wasn't a big town. It never was a big town. During the building of this bridge in 1925 until it ceased operation in 1930, we had, I guess, our largest amount of people in the community, and it was only about what we have now. It was like 25 people. The town was big, and it stayed during the Depression because there was no place to really go. In Ontario, over Canada, when the war started in the 1939-40, there was a mass exodus of people. They went to Sudbury, Sioux, Toronto, and so forth to find jobs in Canada. And so we had, after the war, we probably had our lowest population that we ever had. Although we had one other sizable exodus of people back in 1905. And for some reason or another, about 1/3 of the town, or maybe more, decided to go to Western Canada. And they went out there and started farming and so forth. The government was giving land grants at that time. And most of them were not overpleased with what they were getting. There are a number that did come back. But the number of people who left apparently was amazing. Now I'm going to go look at some of the books that are about. And there's a book called Coyote Flats, which was done with a centennial grant, like many, we did one here, I'm going to talk about just momentarily, for the centennial, there were grants for doing historical books. And this one on the west, it refers to the number of people that come to little towns near Innisfil, which were, it was called Iron Springs and Picture Butte or something like that, where they, two little locations. But apparently they left in the winter to go to the train over in the Spanish or Algoma Mills, I guess they refer to. And as the people, this story is a number of books I've read it in more than one place. As the people left, it was a sunny day, and it looked like the people leaving Egypt, and they all these cattle, horses, people, and their goods were moving across the bay, going across there. And this is recorded in that book. It's also recorded in a book by Frank Myers, who did a history of Manitoba, and another one by Mr. Waitman. Frank Myers' book is another excellent book in history of this area. He talks about the foundation of this place, the native people who were here before that type of thing. And Dr. Waitman's book is called Forever on the Fringe, which refers to mostly the economy in Manitoba, which I referred to a minute ago, that was at 10,000 and still remained 10,000. In other words, in his statute, we really never kept up with the rest of the world. But then, of course, an awful lot of us are really happy. Maybe we didn't get we're what we are. Now, talking about books, I think you're all aware that we do have the centennial book here that was done by Helen Tracy, the person who just mentioned a minute ago, for the library. And it's an excellent history of background for this township. And if you wish to pick that up, they don't sell it anymore, but we have copies up there. And it's a good book. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, thank you. You can tell lots of stories about the town, but I think this is enough for the moment. And thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Ozzy. You were mentioning in your presentation about roads and or the lack thereof back in the early days, and I've had a lot of people ask me, why didn't the Dodges out there when that accident occurred, and they were going to take him to the hospital for medical attention, why didn't they just take him, by way of vehicle, by road? And as you mentioned, there wasn't a road out there. I mean, it was much more like a cow pasture than anything else. So they chose to take the boat to the hospital because they figured it was a quicker way in terms of transportation to get out there. Turned out it was a fatal mistake there. But that came to mind when you were talking about the roads that or again the lack thereof. So I think we're going to take a break. Where's Mary? Mary, there you are. How long of a break do you think we should take?
There wasn't any hospital in Little Creek.
No, they had to go to Mindemoya, right?
We got there.
Yeah, so via Little Current, that was the plan. Yeah.
There wasn't a doctor there. There wasn't a doctor there.
There would have been a doctor at Little Current, yeah, but then they had to get him to a hospital eventually, which was in Mindemoya. How long of a break do you want to take?
I think just 10 minutes and then we're
10,
going to Jeff.
10, 15 minutes?
Yeah,
Say- say fif-
and you can maybe explain what's going to happen next.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna get Lydia to do that. Do you wanna do that, Lydia? Lydia devised the Jeopardy game, so I'll let Lydia explain how that's gonna work.
You make a suggestion, all of a sudden it becomes your job to do these things, right? The Jeopardy game works just like Jeopardy on television if you've watched it. It's actually, I give you the answers and you're going to give me the question in return, and you can earn points, and we have prizes to give away based on the number of points or dollars that you earn. So what we're going to do is take a break. All my information or misinformation for the game has been found in the museum somewhere, so if you have a good memory of things. Unfortunately, some of it might be covered up right now, so I'm just going to have to go. I'll have to say that Audrey did a really good job giving information for the Barry Boats category, so if you were paying good attention, you'll have lots of information for that one. We also have some snacks and refreshments for you if you want to take a refreshment or something around and have a look. We'll again give you about 10 minutes to stretch, and then we'll come back and play a game.
So the categories, just so you know, so if you're walking around, Life and Billings, The Old Mill, Barry Boats, Daniel Dodge, and Modern Day. So walk around, look around, there's lots of clues for the game. There'll be some refreshments.
I'm going back home, but good to see you. I'd like to think you're and you know, some of that's going to be lost. I